I started hearing whispers of Thrawn's return as heir to the Empire.
Everyone in the Order knew Anakin Skywalker. Few would live to see what he became.
Anakin never got to finish my training. I walked away from him, just like I walked away from Sabine.
As a Jedi, sometimes you have to make the decision no one else can. But I'm counting on you to see this through.
We are no Jedi.
This is the Rebel Force Radio Ahsoka After Show.
May the Force be with you.
Yeah, we are no Jedi. That's going to be something we're going to be talking about tonight. We are no Jedi. Is it the third way? Is it a viable third way? Or was that the subject of the Master's final lesson to his Padawan? That is not a way. So much to talk about. You folks out there will never know the pressure that we are under when there's a banger of an episode like this, because we know that you're anticipating the after show like we are, and you don't want to miss anything. You don't want to not bring up the things that people are hoping that we're going to talk about. We'll try to cover it all, but it's a lot. It's a lot to digest. You know, if you get a chance, you can actually, if you look hard enough online, you can actually download the transcript of the episode, and you look at just the scant amount of dialogue, and not just in this episode, but in all the episodes. So there's not a lot of dialogue, but this one, there's so much packed into this, and like with the best Star Wars dialogue, there's a lot that you can read into and interpret. So looking forward to breaking it all down with you here on the Rebel Force Radio Ahsoka After Show. And like I said, there's so much. We can't wait to get to your calls. We'll be monitoring the chats as best as we can, but they go by real fast, so don't think we're ignoring you. Super chats always welcome, not a prerequisite, but always welcome and appreciated. Someone else that's always welcomed and appreciated here at Rebel Force Radio is, of course, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Yeah, Jason, you really telegraph it when you open with banger of an episode. And I think that sort of tips our review in one direction before we've even started it. What I'm looking forward to in this conversation is I don't want over the top. I don't want hyperbole. I want a straightforward breakdown, no exaggeration, a sober-minded and concise review of what was one of the greatest moments in not only Star Wars history, not only the history of televised storytelling, but in the history of storytelling itself. Eclipsing all ancient Greek and Roman mythology, eclipsing it all. This was a religious experience, face-melting, mind-blowing. It was a moment in television history that it caused me to actually impregnate myself while I was watching the show. Unprecedented and amazing.
You're going to have a force baby?
Looking forward to a really, level-headed breakdown of this, and picking apart character motivations, whether or not the characters earned the right to. No, we're gonna be just face melting. Back to you, Jason.
All right. Well, while Mac collects himself, let's give you the tale of the tape on this episode. We are talking about, of course, Ahsoka Season 1, Part 5, Episode 5, Shadow Warrior. And Dave Filoni pulling double duty on this episode as the director and the writer both. And speaking of banger, of course, a banger score, another one by Kevin Kiner. I hope that you have some comments out there about the score. There were a lot of familiar cues in there. People were picking that apart in a good way as you get these little motifs from Star Wars past. The original air date, September 12th, 2023, of course, on Disney+. And a runtime of 46 minutes or thereabouts, minus all those end credits. So a little longer than the last episode. And I don't know if anyone, this is kind of a small detail, I suppose, but as I was thinking about the difference between, say, this episode and last week's episode, and then that third episode, and the way the series so far has paced itself, I have to think that, and maybe this is obvious to people, maybe this has already been talked about, but I have to think that they really are shooting this thing or these series like 6, 7, 8 hour movies. And after they get it all done, they decide where they're cutting, and then they title these segments, these sections, these parts. It's very hard for me to think that these are 8 individual scripts. It just doesn't read that way, because otherwise I don't think you would get things so lopsided as when you say take an epic film and chop it up into multiple 38, 42-minute bits. You're going to get some points where nothing really happens, right? So I don't know. I just think that it colors the way we review this, because we're obviously watching it in real time.
Right. It's spread out over a long period of time. I don't think it's so random as just shoot it all and then decide when the episode begins and ends, because there are directors attached to each episode. So everything we're seeing within that episode itself is seen through the lens of the particular director who's helming it.
Right.
Now, if it was just Filoni the whole way through, then maybe you'd be onto something, Jason. But
yeah, that's a good point.
The pacing of this show, of course, has been something that has puzzled us, because the actual premise of the show was very slow emerging. Now the premise is out there. Finally, after the 5th episode, we know what this show is, what it's all about, what it's supposed to be all about. And it is all about Ahsoka. Finally. Hello, Ahsoka. Where have you been for the last 4 episodes? We're so glad to have you back. And without getting too ahead, I thought it was just unbelievable acting from just about everyone on screen, but most notably from Rosario Dawson. And I love the young Ahsoka actress, too. What's her name? Ariana something or another. She's 15 years old.
She was in the Avengers movie. She played young Gamora, and wasn't she also in the Barbie
was young
movie?
Gamora. I see it now. Yes. Yeah. And I guess she appeared in the Barbie movie this past summer, and she's a real up-and-comer from, I think she's from Puerto Rico, or she's Puerto Rican. And I just thought she was outstanding in this show. Just so much so, I want to see a whole series of live-action Clone Wars with a de-aged Hayden Christensen and this young actress playing Ahsoka. I was so impressed with her. And I just really enjoyed those visits back to Ahsoka throughout her eras. We were on the Ahsoka Eras tour.
Yeah.
Step
it was
aside,
really
Taylor Swift.
It was really a Star Wars carol. It's what it felt like to me. It felt like a Christmas carol. It was like the ghosts of Ahsoka, past, present, future, all of that. I guess they didn't really get into the future. In a way they did. Because she gets spit out of this whole ordeal, this journey in the world between worlds, as was predicted on this show last week. Ahsoka the White, you might say. So she's come into that era of her character. Yeah, there's so much to get into. I think coming away from this episode, the thing that I feel is the most important, I guess, to discuss in a lot of ways is, what was Anakin's lesson? What was the lesson? What did Ahsoka need to learn? What did she learn by the end of this?
Yeah.
So
that's a good question. I mean, I think the whole thing is about her battling her demons and putting away some of the things that may have been poisoning to her personally, and putting the past in the past and being able to move forward. And that's what I think it was. I don't look at it so much as a lesson from Anakin. To me, it's still all an allegory told, it's just up in Ahsoka's head. And obviously her connection to the Force.
Oh, you don't think Anakin was there?
No.
Oh, I disagree with that.
Anakin was there. That was the spirit of Anakin.
Yeah, that was definitely the spirit
I can
of Anakin.
see it that way. I mean, how did you look at the vision Kylo Ren had in The Rise of Skywalker, and Han Solo appeared?
I don't consider that canonical Star Wars, Jimmy Mack, and I refuse to. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'm just asking you how you.
Yeah, you know what?
analyze
I
that.
probably could answer that better. I don't think you can. Okay, I don't have a great answer for it, other than to say I don't think it's comparable because it did not occur in the world between worlds.
Or maybe it did, and we just don't know that because it was presented to us from a certain perspective. I think a lot of things happen in the world between worlds without us fully acknowledging it. Like, for example, when he scores his lightsaber crystal at the temple on Lothal, it's been said by Dave Filoni that he is in the world between worlds during that moment. But it isn't explicit in the storytelling. When he communicates with Yoda in the same place, that also is the world between worlds, but it's not presented to us that way. When Yoda goes on his Force trip with the Force priestesses at the end of season 6 of Clone Wars, he's in the world between worlds, but it's not presented to us with these stellar walkways and portals and all of that, but it's just a certain point of view of the same place or experience.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it is, but Han Solo's no Jedi, and Han Solo doesn't have the ability to retain his. He doesn't have the ability to retain his essence that I know of. So I mean, maybe, but I don't know. I don't know that it's relevant here. I think the tip off that this is really Anakin is the fact that we see two separate Anakin Skywalkers. We see the Anakin Skywalker of the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And then we also see Anakin Skywalker, the narrator, sort of the person that's taking Ahsoka through this journey, leading her through there. The fact that there's two different ones and he's a bystander during the Siege of Mandalore, that tells me that, or at least that makes me believe that that's the ghost of Anakin Skywalker, just like it was the Force ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn in the Mortis arc.
Or the Force is using them as avatars to basically, get inside of Ahsoka's head and work around in there, rummage around in there. And because Anakin didn't provide any information that wasn't already known to Ahsoka in the first place in their back and forth. It's not like he reveals anything to her. It's all about her coming to these cathartic moments. It's all about Ahsoka as far as I'm concerned. That's why I'm not fully sold on the idea that that's actually like the spirit of Anakin Skywalker, but the Force works in mysterious ways. So it's hard to say who inhabits the world between worlds and why.
Yeah.
So I don't rule out what you say either,
Yeah.
Is it the spirit?
Well,
I think I would find, just as a fan, I find more comfort in it being the spirit of Anakin, but it's so nebulous and so certain point of view and all of that stuff that I think you have to be open to anything. And since Anakin didn't actually inform Ahsoka of anything about himself, say, for example, like, did you know when I was Darth Vader, I killed
but he alludes to things. But he alludes to things though in the dialogue. For example, when he says live or die, she says, I won't fight you. He goes, I've heard that before. Referring exactly to what Luke Skywalker says to him, I will not fight you. So that tells me that we've got it post Jedi Anakin.
That's a good one.
And
that's a good one. I will now be feverishly looking for Clone Wars dialogue where someone says that to Anakin before Luke gets a chance to.
Right,
I will not fight you. Well, okay, that when you analyze that line of dialogue the way you just did, it sure appears that that's what he's referring to, is exchange between father and son, and that's something that Ahsoka would know nothing about. However, she does know Luke Skywalker, and so maybe Luke told her that. That could be a possibility as well. We can't rule that out.
Yeah, I was there and I told him, I said, I will not fight you. Yeah, and he threw his lightsaber at me and all kinds of stuff. He's a real ass.
I know
that's my over the top Mark Hamill. That's my like old kind of heavy set Mark Hamill.
Old
like
convention center
even.
Mark
Yeah.
Hamill. That's who it is.
Right.
Old convention center Mark. Now, come on. Let's stay focused on the mythology.
All right. Now, one thing that I think that you and I can both, I hope, absolutely 100% agree upon is that whether or not this is the real Anakin Skywalker or, you know, in Force Ghost or whatever, this Anakin Skywalker is Hayden Christensen channeling Matt Lanter. There is no mistake in my mind that Hayden Christensen, who has admitted that he's, you know, caught up on Clone Wars and really enjoys it, I think he's absolutely taking a page from Matt in the way he delivers these lines. In fact, Filoni even like trolls us a little bit by giving him a line to Ahsoka. He goes, what would you prefer? Tell me, what do you want? You want me to be more serious? You know, when she's annoyed with him because he's making jokes, which is something we never really saw the live action Anakin do. I mean, and it's not a criticism of Hayden. If anything, it's a criticism to some degree of George, where it was so refreshing to see Hayden Christensen play a likable, heroic Anakin Skywalker. It was like this hit of oxygen of like, yeah, that's exactly what I always wanted him to be. And it reminded me, you brought up the sequels, it reminded me of that brief 8 minutes when we get to see Kylo Ren turn back to Ben Solo. And it's like, I love this guy. He was so much fun in the few minutes that we had with him. So I really, you know, as much as we want to throw our all the bouquets and flowers at the feet of Ashley Eckstein, as well we should, I think it's really important to also point out that Matt's Anakin, and a lot of people scratched our heads when he first started doing the voice. He's not a voice double for Hayden like Matt Lucas was from the Gendy series. He did his own thing, and we've talked to Matt many times, and that was the way Filoni coached him. So I don't know. I just love the fact that this it looked like Hayden, it sounded like Hayden, but it was the intonation, the charm, and the charisma of the Matt Lanter version.
Yeah, it didn't hurt that he was calling her Snips multiple times as well.
Right.
But yeah, you know, Matt Lanter certainly deserves his share of ownership of the role of Anakin Skywalker. He played more hours in that role than any other actor. So Matt definitely put his stamp on the character. And yes, those scenes with young Ahsoka on the battlefield of the Clone Wars with Anakin gave me animated Clone Wars vibes like crazy.
Oh my
And I just
gosh.
couldn't believe that we were actually seeing this in live action. What else I like too is how muted the background is. It's pinkish, foggy, you know, haze in the air. So it really turns our focus on the characters and their interaction too, but yet puts us firmly on the battlefield of the Clone Wars without us questioning it for a second. No question about it.
Oh, it's clearly Christophsis, right? From the Clone Wars movie.
Yeah.
Because it had that
It sure
pinkish
appears to be.
atmosphere.
Yeah.
And she even says, this is our first mission together.
Right. I just like how she emerges through the pink mist and goes, this is a Clone Wars.
Right.
And Anakin's like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, no kidding. Right.
But you know, it's her future self embodying and reliving the experience of her first battle with Anakin at Anakin's side, the Battle of Christophsis, as we see in the Clone Wars movie that kicked it all off. And
this is, I thought, a little victory lap for Dave, Jim. I thought just a little bit. That was the movie that was derided. It was the lowest grossing Star Wars movie of all time. And I'm sure that there were a lot of reasons for it. They didn't really make it to be a theatrical release. But I just can't help but think if I'm Filoni, I'm going to show a little bit of that vision of that original movie.
Yeah, and he did. And it expands on the Ahsoka character in such an incredible way. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get into Ahsoka post-battle in just a second, but I just want to talk about some of my first blush knee-jerk reactions to seeing this young actress play Clone Wars era Ahsoka. Of course, give Hayden and this young Ahsoka a Clone Wars era live action show. Provide the stories that the animated series never told. I don't care if
please.
it's just 8 episodes long. Who cares? Or do a movie like that. Now, the other thing is, as soon as I saw the young actress, there was a part of me that was expecting the Ashley Eckstein voice to come out of this character. And I think that would have been jarring. I'm glad they let this young actress embody the role and play it 100%, both physically and verbally, because I thought she just knocked the ball out of the park. I mean, I was so impressed with her, especially the post-battle sequence when we get the most solid breakdown of the character of Ahsoka and her moral foundation, and it all happens within 4 minutes. And she's such a good actress right away. You see, she's feeling compassion for these wounded soldiers, and then she reveals her guilt to Anakin because she essentially ordered them to their deaths.
Right.
Again, she rapid fire. All of these emotions come out. She reveals confusion for the Jedi role in the war, conflict between being a keeper of peace and a soldier, which is something that gets discussed in the Clone Wars finale from season 7. She bears frustration that Anakin has only trained her for battle, and trepidation that at the end of the war, and when it's all said and done, at the end of her Jedi training, all she'll know is how to fight. And that is a natural struggle for her as a Jedi. The other Jedi don't see it, though, because clouded the dark side is. But Ahsoka is so young and fresh to all of this, she only has that perspective. That's her certain point of view. And so I was just so impressed with the way that sequence revealed and built the pillars for what the character of Ahsoka truly is all about, and the character we've known for 15 years since she was introduced in that Clone Wars movie. So I was very impressed with that sequence.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, you had said earlier you weren't quite sure that this was really about a lesson from Anakin imparted to Ahsoka. I mean, she does ask him, she says, well, what's the lesson, Master? And he says, live or die. And that's when she says, I won't fight you. So I started thinking about, all right, what is it? If you don't want to call it a lesson, we can call it a moral, a takeaway. What is it? And I think for me, what the takeaway is that walking away, I think this is a redo and if anything, an indictment on Ahsoka's choice to walk away from the Jedi Council. I think in the moment we were proud of her. We thought it might have been the right idea, but it was not the right idea because walking away is never the right thing to do. It is live or die, fight or retreat. And that doesn't mean, like Obi-Wan says, there are alternatives to fighting. So when he says fight, he's using fight and live kind of synonymously. Fight doesn't always mean taking up arms. Sometimes it can mean just sticking and staying your ground, like what Luke Skywalker did with Vader at the end, and he decided not to take the fatal blow, like what Ahsoka does herself to Anakin Vader, later in the episode, where she doesn't strike the final blow, and that's when he realizes that she's learned the lesson. So I think what Ahsoka found herself doing, and why she was so insufferable, to me at least, earlier on in this series, was because she didn't stay and fight. She left, and then she continued to sort of look down her nose at the people who did stick around. And rightly or wrongly, you can debate who is. The war was unjust. They were being puppeteered on both sides. But the fact was that she walked, and she left the people who had, in many cases, whether it's Anakin or her own clone troopers, risked everything for her. Now, this isn't like picking on Ahsoka, but I think we're mistaken if we don't walk away from this episode realizing that this is, in many ways, a make good for the fact that she took the easy way out and walked away instead of staying there and fighting for change and fighting for the light side in the Jedi Council.
So are you saying through Ahsoka's fear and selfishness that maybe she found herself clouded by the dark side of the Force?
I think it was her own inhumility. I think it was her own ego. And I'm not saying I would have made a better choice. I'd have been mad as hell. She was framed. They didn't have her back. It was endless war that she saw. So I get it. But at the end of the day, it was the wrong decision. She made the wrong decision. And had she stayed, very, very possible that the galaxy would have ended up different.
It's very possible her mere presence and influence would have swayed Anakin to the light side of the Force.
Right.
As opposed to the dark side.
Right.
The Ahsoka we see in the first 4 episodes of the show, obviously sapped of mojo. But I think that's just a creative decision to really show the transformation that occurs to her in this episode. And she emerges, we see her emerge on the other side, and we realize the guilt she has for the fall of Anakin Skywalker. Had she stayed, could she have saved him? Could she have influenced him in the right way? Could everything have changed? Who knows? And I think that's a guilt that Ahsoka's been walking around with. I just have a lot of questions about, and I'm having more confidence that these questions will be answered this season in Ahsoka. But I really want to know, how did she escape Malachor? She went back when Ezra pulled her and saved her. She did return to Malachor, and she didn't have a ship or anything, as far as I know. She was sidelined during the original trilogy. Why? Where was she? As a matter of fact, where was she in the period from the end of the Clone Wars all the way up to the beginning of the Rebels season? That's about a 15-year chunk. Where is Ahsoka? Obviously, Smart Money says she was hiding out and laying low because Order 66 was going down. But that's a big chunk of her history that's missing. Also, we don't know why she decided to train Sabine in the Jedi arts and what encouraged her or forced her hand to leave Sabine, what motivated her to leave Sabine. We also don't know how she reunited with Huang, and how does she know Luke Skywalker? These are big questions I have about Ahsoka's character, so I can't jump to any conclusions about why she is exactly the way she is, outside of it's a directorial decision made in the first half of this season to prevent a solid contrast between the Ahsoka of old and the Ahsoka of new, who's been reborn, who is now Ahsoka the White, and she's emerged from the belly of the whale, only to go back into literally the belly of the whale.
Right. Yeah. No, there's right. There's no question that this is about transformation. There is a whole rabbit trail for those of you who are yelling at your speakers right now. There is a whole rabbit trail that you can go on about her dying on Mortis, her ending up in the War Between Worlds, whether or not I've seen people speculating whether Ahsoka's really alive.
Right, yeah.
You know, in the sense that
Ahsoka's a bird.
What
are we getting into?
Convery, that is that what it's called? The owl?
Yeah, it has a name, Morai. And it I just, after the whole Porg disappointment of The Last Jedi, I really don't have any room for dumb Star Wars birds anymore. So I was relieved to see that the bird didn't show up in the World Between Worlds or anywhere. Since I'm not saying the bird isn't going to show up, but I don't know. I think a bird is removing a lot of Ahsoka's relatability. If like things come down to a bird. I was hearing people say, "Yeah, I think the bird pulled her into the World Between Worlds." I was like, "The bird is pulling her in? How's it? What?" So I lose relatability, and then I get cranky, and I start shaking my fist at the clouds. You guys know the whole routine. You listen to this show, but I don't have room for the bird right now. After all we've been through, I don't need that element being introduced. Maybe down the road, but not now.
What I think Ahsoka the White is I actually think that she's been alive all this time. Yeah, she had a moment on Mortis. I don't think anything that happened on Mortis has any real basis in material reality. I think it was all metaphysical, metaphorical. As far as I think she was about to meet her end when she got pulled from the world between worlds. I think she's corporeal. I think she's alive. What the white is her full commitment back to the light side of the Force in the ways of the Jedi. That's what it is. And that's what Anakin was trying to get to her. When Anakin is as Vader, and they're having that battle, he says, you lack conviction. It's about live or die. It's like he couldn't get anywhere with her by being the nice Anakin. So it's like, fine, you want to play tough? I'll play tough. And he turns into the mean Anakin, or the mean Anakin, the Vader version of Anakin. And I love this exchange that they have where he's trying to let her understand that it's bigger than just her. She's making a lot of this about her, I think. Her. She walked away from the Jedi count or the Jedi Order. She walked away from Sabine. She's a quitter. Sorry for all of you Ahsoka lovers. I love her too, but she's a quitter. And Anakin's trying to make sure she understands that she's part of something bigger. He talks about the legacy. I inherited knowledge from my master and he from his. You're part of a legacy. And she says, but my part of that legacy is one of death and war. It's like, all right, kid. Yeah. Are we perfect? No. But the Jedi and the legacy of Obi-Wan Kenobi, me, Yoda, on and on back, it's bigger than just that. And it's bigger than just you. And she gets kind of almost like a petulant child, I think. He says, he says, you're more than that because I'm more than that. And what does she do? She insults him. She goes, yeah, you are more than that, Anakin. You are more powerful and dangerous than anyone realized. And then he looks at her and goes, oh, is that what this is about? Like, you're going to throw that in my face? All right, like fine. That. You want to throw Anakin out? Let's get the Anakin out. And he turns into Anakin. I just thought it was fantastic. I thought it was so well done. But that third way BS of not being a Jedi, that's her lack of conviction. That's her in this gray, muddy area, why she feels unfulfilled and is just going from one place to the next and never able to commit because it is that lack of commitment, that lack of conviction. But she comes out of this, I think, fully committed. That's my read on it.
Great read, Jason. I mean, that's very solid. And as far as the scenes between Anakin and young Ahsoka, I thought there was more chemistry between those two characters on screen than I saw between Hayden and Nat. And the entire I'm muting my phone.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you make sure? Because I know
I left
she
it
listens.
upstairs.
Oh, good.
I left it upstairs.
All right, good.
Oh, there goes my watch. I'm not picking it up on my watch though. But I sense great chemistry between these two actors on screen, and
they were brilliant together. They were absolutely brilliant together.
And she's great, and I'm really going to be following her career with great interest.
Great interest.
Yes, great interest. I'll follow your career. But her name is it's Ariana Greenblatt. Ariana Greenblatt. And she is awesome. So I just wanted to look up her name and let her know that I thought
she wasn't she was in the proper credits where it's just the name. She wasn't in the, it drives me nuts in the credits of this show where they'll put the names of the actors, but they don't do that full cast list.
Yeah.
I hate that. So got to give her credit. She was awesome. She was just awesome. And I got to be honest with you, it never occurred to me that we would ever see another actress cast as Ahsoka. I mean, it makes sense now. I'm glad that they went with a younger actress rather than having a full-grown Rosario Dawson in there. Great choice, but it was not something I anticipated or thought was going to happen.
Right. Me neither, but I wasn't surprised it happened. And just every moment she was on screen, like when she has that first interaction with Anakin and they're at the Battle of Christophsis and he is acting kind of cold about the deaths, and he doesn't really seem to care about her feelings, and he's telling her to live in the moment, and it's just an amazing scene as he walks away, and she's just staring at him in shock.
Yeah.
And he's marching away and fading into the mist as the vision flickers to Darth Vader and then back to Anakin. I'm like, oh, dude, goosebumps. What are they doing to me here?
It was so cool.
God.
Just going from this, we got it up here on the screen. And is this like right out of Clone Wars or what? This looks like an absolute capture from Clone Wars. And then into this, it was so well done. And Hayden Christensen just looked phenomenal as this era of Anakin. And I got to tell you guys, I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit. I've been working with Mac for 15 plus years on this show, and even I can't get him to comment about these episodes until we sit down to do this after show. I can't. I mean, we'll text and I don't blame him. I understand. That's all part of the prep, and that's all part of the getting the thoughts together and all of that. And so I respect that. And the only thing I said to him last night, I said, this is the only thing I'm going to say to you, is that outside of Ray Park, the greatest swordsman in Star Wars is Hayden Christensen. I think. I don't think, and he is like freaking Errol Flynn, that guy. As far as I can tell, I'm a layman, I'm certainly not an expert, but he moves so well. And I assume that is Hayden. It could be a stunt double. I don't know that to be true. I know Hayden I remember Nick Gillard saying that he and Ewan were two of the most natural students he ever had as far as, sword fighters. But, and some of the iconic poses, I don't know for sure, but it looks like some of the moves that he was doing with Ahsoka were right out of Revenge of the Sith. So some of their lockups were very, very comparable to the Duel of the Fates, or the Battle of Heroes, I mean.
This is a production that's taking Star Wars dueling seriously. I don't think the sequels took dueling seriously. This does. And you mentioned the name Nick Gillard. Of course, he was the guy who built the choreography for all those scenes in the prequel era. And I think that we're seeing the best saber duels since the prequel era. I know Nick is not necessarily connected to this project, but all of the experience that a guy like Hayden Christensen had with Nick Gillard over the years is obviously going to shine in any saber dueling he's doing on screen from forever. And I agree with you. The posing, the slickness of it all. It tells a story, and as opposed to just swinging at each other, thrashing about.
Right.
Which I felt like was going down when Rey was fighting with Kylo or whoever else. I was just thrashing about. There was no poetry to the motion. These saber duels are the best, and they provide all of the poetry that you need to the motion. And the motion provides poetry. It's a wonderful thing.
It's a lot of times fight choreographers and sword fight choreographers, they talk about it being like a dance, and dance tells a story. Yes. And that is what I'm seeing in these lightsaber battles. Is I'm seeing narrative, I'm seeing storytelling in the battles themselves that we haven't seen, absolutely, like you said, since the prequels and Nick Gillard's attention to it. And yes, as much as I'm an original trilogy diehard, of course the sword fighting and the prequels are superior. I mean, that's by design. Although I will say that the emotion that is on display in the battle between Vader and Luke in Empire on Cloud City, and then on the Death Star 2 and Jedi, is at a fever pitch. The environments, there's a lot of things that are added to that battle other than just swordplay to increase the drama and tell the story. I didn't get that from not just the sequels, but in some of these Disney Plus series. As much as I loved the emotion and what was on display with the Kenobi series and that duel between him and Vader. There were two of them. It wasn't like this. This was, like you say, this was poetry.
Yes. And these little duels they were having within the world between worlds were like bookends to each of these challenges that were being presented by this vision through the three eras: Padawan, Rogue Warrior fighting for Mandalore, and post-Empire Ahsoka. So it was just amazing as Ahsoka outmaneuvered Anakin during the swordplay, and she actually stripped the blade from him.
Yep.
She's stripping the power away from the guilt of Anakin's turn and eventual death, from the guilt that she carries around. It's all allegorical.
Yeah.
She's facing her demons head on and defeating them.
But she
And that's
doesn't
what it's
strike
all
the
about.
death
It's
blow.
not about defeating Anakin. It's
Right.
about defeating her personal demons that haunt her. And they restrict her from growth within the Force and within the physical realm as well.
Well,
That's
she
my-
defeats the dark side. She defeats the dark side in herself, which you could say is the doubt, is
Right.
the lack of faith and all of that. I mean, what she does in this moment where she's got the saber up to his throat, she spares him just like Luke spares him in Return of the Jedi. And that's when Anakin says, there's hope for you yet.
Yeah. There, yes, and she has succeeded at that point.
Right.
And oh, by the way, Anakin, Sith eyes, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the little things sometimes.
Right.
So she passes the test, and then she gets baptized and reborn as Ahsoka the White. So the first thing that happens when she opens her eyes under, oh, and by the way, that's a thing, the belly of the whale thing. That's a big transformation along the road of the hero's journey, according to a dude like Joseph Campbell, is that you do get immersed into, you get swallowed into the unknown.
Right. The beast.
And you give the appearance of death. And that's what happened here as Ahsoka was reborn. I know people are saying, "Oh, she doesn't go into the belly of the whale until after this part," but the world between worlds is the belly of the whale, according to Joseph Campbell. That's the big. She has crossed the threshold, and now she is being reborn. The first thing she sees when she opens her eyes underwater is that bright white light coming from the ship, and people who claim to have returned from death, they often report they saw a bright white light,
Yeah.
And after being saved, she awakens in a room bathed in the white light, and she rejoins her companions, now sheathed in light, refreshed, alive, invigorated, strong with the Force, and fully committed now. And you see it in her personality. It's, oh my God, Ahsoka is here. This is great. Did you notice when she awoke? She for the first time ever, we see her. She's not wearing that typical headdress she always wears. She's
Right.
just completely nude up there.
Yeah.
But-
She's got naked Leku.
Naked
Sexy.
lady. So it's all because of Jason Syndulla. Without him,
Oh, yes.
Ahsoka would have drowned. So mad props to Jason, who, as a character, has earned my respect probably more swiftly than any other character in Star Wars. He's been featured very sparingly up until this episode, but he connects with the Force, and he hears and feels through the Force Ahsoka having this final trial of this final Jedi trial, and he tunes into it. And it was just such a great scene that he hears the ocean, and his whole scene was well acted and supported by the foundations of who his character is and who his father was.
Yes.
It's the bloodline theme. The Force is strong. The Force runs strong in my family. It's a theme in Star Wars, and that whole sequence was definitely crafted with I thought the acting was solid. There was exposition to support what happened with Huang and forming Teva, and thus the audience as to why this kid can touch the Force, who he is. You know, not everyone's a super fan like this. I spend my whole day talking to Muggles. and it was almost like
I love that Mac is back in the land of Muggles. I just love it.
and I'll tell you, it's like listening to them talk is like listening to me talk in confusing circles about what I just saw at the latest Marvel film. I mean, they're not steeped in the mythology. And this show is truly for someone who's steeped in the mythology, because people are this day are still watching the show going, wait a second, Anakin had a Padawan? I mean, people are doing this, and these are people who've seen every live action Star Wars, anything, but have they read a novel? Have they read a comic book?
Right.
Do they follow this stuff online? Do they watch the animated series? No. And so they're confused, but I'm not talking to them right now.
No,
I'm talking.
That is a problem. We'll save that for this week on Rebel Force Radio, the podcast. We can talk about that stuff.
But I mean, it was all there was so well crafted. So anyone who never saw any of the animated series, at least they have the ammunition to understand who these characters are and where they come from. And then, of course, to top it all off, Kevin Kiner throws in the Force theme, and we hear lightsaber clashing in the sound mix and stuff. And this is all happening at the same time that Anakin and Ahsoka are having their confrontation in the world between worlds. So we see what they're hearing up on the surface, and then we see everything that they've been hearing. And it was just Star Wars perfection in my book.
Dude, there were several moments when I got the goosebumps. One of them is exactly what you just pointed out, when the Force theme played. I don't believe that the Force theme, look, I'm not saying they should throw it all over the place willy-nilly, but when a character is exhibiting Force powers, it needs to be there. It needs to be there. Just like when Bond is doing something Bond-like in the James Bond movies, you got the Bond theme tearing in. So that's got to be there. I appreciate the respect that a lot of the creatives have for that sacred music, but it as you pointed out over how long now, it is the oxygen of Star Wars, and it's so important. The other thing was, may the Force be with you. At the very end, it was giving me some Empire Strikes Back vibes as Ahsoka and Huyang go off to find Sabine. It was very much like the end of Empire, you know. They're sitting there and, okay, we'll find them and we'll let you. And may the Force be with you. That was awesome. It doesn't just belong to the Skywalkers. It's okay for other characters to say that, and it's okay for the music to come in. So yeah, I just more of that, please, because it does send a signal to people who are tuning into this, and maybe they are more muggly, and they hear those themes and they hear those phrases and they know they're watching Star Wars. I think it's really important. So, and we love it too as fans. Speaking of Jason, I did want to mention, you know, he's brought up in, there was another episode where he's like, I want to be a Jedi too. And Hera just doesn't even really acknowledge it. I don't know if you know. She just kind of, it's like when you hear your kid say they want a toy when you're walking down the toy aisle at the store. You just kind of pretend you didn't hear it. But, you know, at the end, he hugs Ahsoka. He's so happy. And he's like, Ahsoka, I heard you fighting. And she's like, you did? She's very interested. How is this possible? Ooh, how strong is he with the Force? She's like, yeah, lightsabers. Who were you fighting with? And then Hera's like, hey, I got an idea. Why don't you go off with Huyang and go look at a ship? So two things that I noticed here. One, I don't think Hera wants that for Jason. I think that's going to be something that's going to emerge as a story point, that she lost Kanan. Yes. She's in the process of perhaps losing Sabine.
And Ahsoka.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And Ezra. She doesn't want that for her son. I don't necessarily blame her. So I think she's going to become an obstacle for the training. And the other thing that was interesting about that scene is Ahsoka, because Jason says, oh, I've been on a starship before. And she goes, a Jedi starship. So it was like the first time she is using that word Jedi, like in a positive. No, that's not just any starship. That is a Jedi starship. I could be reading into it, but I thought it was deliberate.
No, I think all of those elements are fair to throw into play, knowing what we know about the character. Again, looking for something to back that up would be nice. But what we do have that backs up their relationship is one thing's for sure. Hera has seen enough force ability from Jason Syndulla up to this point that she doesn't underestimate him when he says, listen, do you hear it? She closes her eyes and tries to hear it. She doesn't. But she doesn't doubt for a second that this kid that's her son. She knows him. She knows him better than anyone else in the world.
Boy, am I glad to hear you say that you don't think she heard it, because I don't think she heard it either.
No.
And I'm glad. I don't want her to have heard it, because then it makes it not special. It doesn't make the ability unique. But I rewound that scene probably 10 times just to see her expression.
Yeah.
And I think you could argue it either way. I don't feel that the actress commits one way or the other, but I love your interpretation. I think that's the takeaway on that.
Well, she looks at him, and that's all she needs, all the convincing she needs. If she knows he's hearing something, and she's seen him display force abilities before, so she doesn't doubt it, and she doesn't second guess it. She trusts him and jumps into action. And it turns out the little sucker was right. But everyone gets their hero moment in this too. Hera definitely is a hero because she initiates the action. Carson Teva seems skeptical, and they're wasting fuel. Of course, he's being practical and realistic, but no, she's going to stick with this kid's mere notion that something's going on out in the water. And she's going to investigate that stuff until, sure enough, they discover it's actually Chopper who's the one who finally picks up Ahsoka on his scopes in the water. So everyone gets a hero moment. Everyone gets a moment in the spotlight here. As
you get to be a hero.
Together.
You get to be a hero. No, you're right.
They get to work together.
It's a really well even-handed episode in terms of giving these characters their moments. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's important as someone who is a story manager like Dave Filoni is, just to make sure that none of his characters end up being props, because that happens far too frequently.
Yes.
In a lot of storytelling. You ask yourself, why is that person there? Or in Star Wars, why is that droid there? It's a question I ask myself. Why did they take BB-8 on board the Star Destroyer when they were trying to in The Last Jedi, when they were with the code breaker and he was going to drop their shields or something or another? Why did they bring BB-8 with them? They had to disguise him, and they did it by putting a garbage can over him. So there's this upside down garbage can rolling down the hallway. Like, that's not going to set off any kind of
because if
alarm.
I remember right,
Jim,
they don't
nothing he does. There's
he
no
doesn't,
purpose for BB-8.
He doesn't have one of those R2 hero moments where he plugs into something and
and they don't need him because they have the code breaker. He's the one who's going to break in for them. So they don't even require BB-8 with them on that mission at all. So I'm not left asking questions like,
let's paint by numbers. It's, hey, we need a droid on this mission. Let's put BB out there. Because
BB hasn't been in the film enough, and we got a lot of toys to sell, or else that Spiro company's going under.
Hey, if I may, I'll say someone who did not emerge a hero in this episode is Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma is kind of a turning into a little bit of a bureaucratic stick in the mud.
What can she do? What can she said? She reveals we get.
She's the Supreme
Chancellor.
Chancellor.
Princess Leia gets a shout out.
Yeah.
Is she? Is she the Chancellor? Do we know this?
Yes,
has that
we
been
do.
revealed?
She is the
Do
Chancellor.
they call her Chancellor Mon Mothma? I mean, that's consistent with the expanded universe, so I applaud that, obviously. But I just want to make sure that has been confirmed. She appeared in that Senate Oversight Committee, so she just appears to still be a senator. Who?
No, I don't think she's just a senator. I think she is the Chancellor at this point.
Okay, all right. That's one little aspect I have not. That's a detail I have not paid attention to until right now. So
One
but
more detail that I heard, and I don't know, I don't have a link, but I take this with some authority here that that Filoni or somebody associated with the production did say that this takes place concurrently with the events of Mando season 3. So this is not after Mando season 3. This is along with.
right.
Because there was some confusion about it.
I had speculated when Grogu saw the Purgle flying around that he was actually witnessing something that was happening in the Ahsoka series. So it's possible that he was seeing the moment from the end of the show.
So cool. Well, we thought, maybe they're telegraphing that they'll need to recruit Grogu in order to talk to the Purgle to get to Ezra.
Yes, right. But I don't see that coming into play.
No, I don't either. I think you're right. I think we saw this cool other side of the camera moment with with Yoda, with Baby Yoda. You know who I'm talking about, Grogu.
You call him Baby Yoda.
Yeah. But I get you. I think, you could say Mon is stuck between a rock and a hard place, but boy, she's like, do you have Morgan Elsbeth in custody? Well, no. Do you have evidence of Imperial remnant activity or of Grand Admiral Thrawn's return? I don't have any. Well, do they have evidence? I mean, there's the evidence of one of their high-ranking generals having firsthand knowledge of this being some sort of plot there.
Right. She's done the recon already, but everything is unauthorized. It's all done off the book. So it's a hard sell politically. As
Isaiah says, I'm so shocked how corrupt the New Republic is. Isaiah, I don't think that it's corruption. I think it's just incompetence. That's what I think it is.
That's what happens when you have a democracy. Anyone can potentially become a political leader in that situation. And they all have different motivations. They all come from different places. They all earned their way into their role politically through legit means and some through not so legit means. So that's the price you pay for democracy, is all of these different voices at the table and a level of cynicism across the board. People want proof. And that's how real life is. And in this case, I mean, Mon Mothma can't just, overlook the fact that Hera committed a crime. And she went on this unauthorized mission using New Republic resources to suit her own means. Regardless of how right or just they are, we as an audience know that Hera's doing everything for the fight for right. But that's not how it works in the real world. There's paperwork. There's permissions you have to get.
The EU is full of stories about the paperwork that needs to be filed on these things. Jim, you mentioned earlier about about Princess Leia getting a shout out. I love it because not only does she get a shout out, but the context is that Carson says, well, Senator Organa says she can only give us cover for so long. So there's Leia throwing cover for Ahsoka, and we know that Ahsoka's already met Luke, so obviously I would assume she's known to Leia. So there she is, once a rebel, always a rebel, which it will sort of foreshadows her falling out from the New Republic later on as she senses this threat. Man, oh man, so many super chats. You guys are amazing. Thank you. I want to get to some of these here. This is 6-Inch Galaxy says RFR number 1, Ahsoka Part 5, also number one. Anakin was a badass. Yeah, Anakin was great. Fart Party's here. Clinking beers. Thank you very much, Fart Party. This is from Mike James. Mike says, this episode really hit me hard. Wow, made myself and my girlfriend Gemma proud to be a Star Wars fan. Clone Wars era Anakin and Ahsoka was such a win. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Jim. I think that this could have gone badly. Like it might not have worked, but they did it really, really well as far as bringing live action.
The execution of this is about as perfect an episode of a Star Wars streaming series that you can ever ask for. And it certainly is doing a great job laying down the foundation for the feature films when they do eventually return. I predict. See, I was really wound up about this whole threat of Grand Admiral Thrawn and why we as an audience are supposed to care. I mean, the guy, he lost his last battle. That was 10 years prior. He's been completely wiped out of the galaxy. Nobody knows if he's dead or alive. What sort of resources does he have? Why are we assuming his mere return is going to unite the Imperial forces, which seem to be kind of dysfunctional, as we saw with Moff Gideon and the gang? And it wasn't adding up to me. And after this episode, I understand the premise for this series now. And it wasn't made obvious until probably, toward the end of episode 4. And this episode drove it home what the premise of it is. And that's Ahsoka finding herself in the Force and reemerging as this Ahsoka the White, as we got teased with at the end of the final episode of Rebels. Thrawn is not the priority in this series. My issue with Thrawn is that why do the mere rumors of his return make Ahsoka jump into action when she is, from what we can tell, been sitting on the sidelines during the time of the entire original trilogy? What more motivation did she need during that time as the Empire was blowing up planets and enslaving people and bringing the hammer of all of their might down on the throat of the galaxy? Where was Ahsoka during all this period? Now she's suddenly springing into action because the idea of someone considered long dead is being rumored in the galaxy. I mean, had she just gotten a Twitter account or something? Or, I mean, what fired her up? Why was she on the sidelines during the entire time of the original trilogy? Now that this whole series has finally established what its premise is, it's all about Ahsoka and Ahsoka finding herself back in the Force and reestablishing herself in this rebirth as the new guiding light in the galaxy.
Absolutely.
And the character that will carry the franchise into feature films. And in the feature films, the return of Thrawn will become the real priority for us as an audience and for all of the characters. But right now, the priority is establishing who Ahsoka is in this era.
Yeah. I just have one request. Can Force Ghost Anakin head over to Ahch-To and kick Luke's ass and bring him into action the way he brought Ahsoka into action? Could that happen, please? I'd like to see him get the fire lit under his butt the way Ahsoka did, because Anakin sure was effective in bringing her back into the fray.
The sequel trilogy really painted the character of Luke into a corner for us.
Yeah.
And so it's like, no matter what, even if Luke himself ventures into the world between worlds and has his own conflict with the specter of Anakin Skywalker, be it a vision or the actual spirit himself, I mean, what's that going to resolve? Because we know how it all ends. And it ends on such a bummer.
It really does.
A bummer unfitting of the
Luke.
character of Luke Skywalker. Here
Yeah.
with Ahsoka, Filoni is doing it right.
Well, maybe there's a way, not saying this is done on purpose, I'm just saying maybe we can take some solace in the redemption of Ahsoka that we just didn't get with Luke. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a consolation prize, but maybe it is in some ways. And I know that there are people out there, believe me, we hear from you. I know there are people out there that have identified with the condition that Luke was in these movies, and you get something out of it. More power to you. But as you know, as a kid that grew up with Luke Skywalker as one of their heroes, it wasn't necessarily the send off that I wanted. But it seems like Ahsoka is really, really living up to that, and that's the emergence of her in white. Want to jump over, by the way, you all know the phone number by now. We've got a lit up switchboard, but I do want to put the number on the screen, 708-866-1737. Patreon members and supporters of Rebel Force Radio do get sent to the head of the line by this guy right here, Tyler Page, the official RFR call screener and the show observer. Hey, Tyler, thanks for being with us as always and screening the calls. Do we have some good ones in the hopper?
Yeah, plenty of good ones. Got some classics, some classic callers, and some new ones.
Tyler was at the screening last night in the Chicago area.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So I want to know, when were the moments that elicited the loudest fan reactions to what was happening on screen?
Hayden was like pretty big, but honestly, the mall, the Siege of Mandalore scene, that was the one where people were like,
the Mandalorian.
Yeah, which was kind of
Mandalorian.
Really?
Chicago fans
Get a
love
bunch
the
of
Mandalorian.
nerds.
Yeah, he definitely is testing very high here in the Chicago area. Definitely, Chicago area Star Wars fans want more Mandalorians. But really, that surprises me that you say that the appearance of that guy, while it was visually very pleasing and awesome and everything, it was. I was hoping that maybe a big story beat was the one that was resonating with people, and not the mere visual of an action figure on screen for half a second.
Yeah, I mean, there might have been some cheers. There's a lot of cheers. That one was the one that really stuck out to me because I was like, wait a minute.
I have that action figure on display in my house.
That's so Chicago, Hey, this Ahsoka thing's really great, but how about some more Mandalorians? The Mandalorians, one with the horns on the head. I love the horns on the head.
The horns.
The head.
All right, Ty, we'll check back in with you in a little bit. Did you get one of those posters they were handing out?
I did. These posters are more coveted than anything I've ever received. So
yeah, do you have one you can show it off for us?
It's not within arm distance right now, but
all right. We'll grab it before the end of the show and you can show it off because before it gets listed on eBay, you can give your eBay handle. We can all, yeah. No, it's those are always very coveted. Whenever celebrations when they're doing screenings, it's great. But it's a beautiful poster.
Gonzi Merchant in the chat says his theater, where he attended the screening, the biggest response from them was when the first clone troopers started to run through the fog.
There's a good one for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
George Lucas had always said that shot in Attack of the Clones during the Battle of Geonosis as the clone troopers are pushing forward, and it's just everything is seen through the perspective of this big dust cloud. And George is famous for saying, now that right there visually is the Clone Wars. And so I kind of feel like that shot may have inspired these Clone Wars flashbacks. And I thought they were so well handled because, like I said, with all the haze and fog, it really puts your focus on the characters themselves while still keeping you as a viewer in that environment of the battle. So well done and simplified, just keep it simple, stupid. That's the way that George Lucas did it at times. He overwhelmed us a lot of times with big, vast establishing shots and amazing special effects. But at the end of the day, he would always keep the character motivations and interactions nice and simple and clean. And I got that from these episodes. I really did. I was just overjoyed with the way this whole thing was just laid out in front of us. I mean, now I'm getting in final thoughts territory. So
all right, wait, we don't want to hear from Tyler. We don't want to blow your load on the. You want to blow your final thoughts.
Tyler, just real brief. You blow your load now.
Okay.
Let's get this going here.
Yeah, well, I was excited like everyone else, but like being in the theater again, seeing Star Wars, getting in line with people waiting to get in there, that was a really great experience. And I hope they keep doing it and in more theaters so people can experience it. What
about story-wise? What about the impact of what went down with these characters?
Seeing Anakin again was awesome. I think, and I said this to Barry, who I went with, I was like, you know how I know that's not the real Anakin? Because he would have kicked her butt from Sunday to Monday if it was a real fight. But like the headiness of it was kind of just like, it was kind of hard to absorb in a theater with people. I had to kind of come home and rewatch it and be like, okay, wait, what is?
Oh yeah, when was the screening? Was that what time did you go?
It was 7:00.
7:00. So you got to like, so it was early, and then you got to go home and then wait for it to come on Disney Plus, or it was on by the time you got home. That's kind of cool.
Exactly.
That's kind. What was the crowd like? Did you have a decent number of people there?
Yeah, it was packed. We were gonna have Billy.
That's awesome.
Come in, but it was like the line was 120 people, maybe full theater.
Great news.
So Billy Mack got shut out.
Oh, yeah. Billy Mack tried to show up.
Yeah.
Did he be like, you know who I am?
Yeah. He should have showed up with Puppet Lando. Yeah. They would open the door wide for him. Could have entertained the crowd before it started.
Man. All right, Ty, we'll check in with you before the end of the show. Thanks so much. Thanks for the recon. Grab that poster if you can and show it off. We're going to hit the phones. A lot of super chats we got to get to, but let's start off with we got a Patreon and a first-time caller here, Aaron. Aaron from Florida. Hello, Aaron from Florida. Yo,
hey,
Aaron. Hey.
What's up, guys?
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, Aaron.
I'm doing great. I'm a Patreon member, longtime listener for
thank you for
a
that.
decade now. You were the first podcast I've ever listened to, and now I think I started when I was like 13, and now I'm 25.
It's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. Swank was the first podcaster I ever listened to. I'll tell you that right now. Jason Swank was the first. He was my very first, and I was 37. I was a 37-year-old virgin.
You your first, right?
Yeah, you do, and he was gentle with me too.
Well, I have a theory or my understanding of what Anakin was in this episode, and just wanted to run it by you guys.
Sure.
All right. I believe Anakin has fully embodied the role of the chosen one, meaning he has transcended both the duality of light and the dark, and he is not restricted by them. He's not seduced by the passion of the dark side or the dogmatic narrow views of the Jedi. He can be whatever is needed in the moment. Like, for example, we saw in this episode, Anakin could transition from the light to the dark back and forth pretty effortlessly, you know?
Yeah,
it's amazing what you can do when you're dead, but that's a certain point of view. That's a certain point of view. I quite honestly don't see it that way. I think Jason
more
does,
mythological
but I don't.
Point of view.
Well, Aaron, I like your theory because it doesn't involve Mortis. I no offense to the Mortis fans out there. It's just a little too inside baseball for me. Although Filoni, throwing out World Between Worlds and other Easter eggs from his animated universe that he's created, nothing's impossible. Man, I don't think that a show like this can survive World Between Worlds and Mortis at the same time. So I like your theory, Aaron, that at the very least, I can get on board with the fact that being the chosen one, which he is undisputably the chosen one, being the chosen one, he does bring balance, and he does have that balance within himself. So I do think that it could very well explain why he's able to vacillate between the light and the dark and pull himself back. That was the thing that was so cool, is that when Ahsoka refused to kill him, he pulls back, he closes his eyes, concentrates for a moment, and then he's back as light side Anakin. So I love that. I love that it doesn't require Mortis to get on board with your theory. So I believe, put me on team. It's really Anakin spirit. I think Mac is still not ready to commit to that.
No,
it's inside Ahsoka's head.
It's Anakin. Anakin served whatever role Ahsoka needed him to serve as she was fighting those demons. It's not about him actually, my take, it's not about him actually being there. But I also don't believe the Mortis adventure ever happened. And there's a lot of things that sort of prove my point. The clone troopers respond that no time had passed. Their ship was all, it was always there. And to anyone who could tell, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka just passed out in that ship. They had a shared vision. The Force was providing all that to them. Ahsoka didn't actually go to the world between worlds, but she did via the Force. Her body, during all that time, in my opinion, is still floating in the water. Undetectable, maybe, but physically still there.
Mhm.
While she's tripping off in some other realm.
Jim, the thing that would support your theory is that Chopper starts to get sensor readings while she's still in the world between worlds. So your theory that she's still very much physically present under those waters is backed up by that. But Aaron,
But
thanks for
not
the call, buddy.
everything's happening in real
Appreciate
time. I want to point out that everything's happening in real time. When Jason says, "Listen, don't you hear the lightsabers?" and he closes his eyes and he's hearing all of that. We see what he's hearing in its completion when they cut back to the world between worlds. So he hears it, and then we see what he's hearing.
What he just got it. What he
and
just
we're
heard.
not supposed to be like looking at a stopwatch going, okay, that happened a minute ago. This is happening.
Right.
It's all happening at once. It's all
Right.
very, very fluid and happening at once. And was Ahsoka's body always in the water? I mean, they found her there. That's where she would naturally be after falling off that cliff. Where else would she be? Physically.
Right. Here's Andrew, Patreon member and first-time caller from South Dakota. What's going on, Andrew?
Chut.
What's
Going on?
How are you?
Yeah, just wanted. Awesome. How are you guys?
Good, man.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a hat off to Dave Filoni. I haven't seen Saber work like that since I was a wee lad watching 1, 2, and 3 in the theaters. And
yeah, it was.
wow,
It was good. Filoni, we had a clip on the podcast on the flagship show, Rebel Force Radio. We had a clip of Dave talking about those battles and how they're taking them very seriously, those lightsaber battles. So he's very much aware. He's very much aware of what he's doing. And, you can look at it that it's a commentary maybe on other lightsaber battles. Who's to say? But, when Filoni's behind the camera, they're going to be legit. And he's a prequel guy. I mean, he's an original trilogy guy, but I mean, he was standing in the line to get into Celebration 2 in a Plo Koon costume. So
despite my age, being born in the 60s and being raised on the original trilogy, I also consider myself a prequel guy. Maybe not exclusively, but I do consider myself a big fan of the prequel and a supporter of the prequel trilogy. And, it put a target on my back for a while there in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I didn't care.
He's one of those.
I was saying it loud and saying it proud.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I love seeing the raw emotion coming from Anakin, because in the Clone Wars, when the other Jedi are getting tipped that he has confusion in him, and you can really see that raw emotion when he's with his Padawan alone rather than the animated series. You can really tell he's just kind of flary. He's got that fight in him.
Yeah.
And seeing those Burgles live action, wow.
That was pretty neat.
My main question was how do you guys think they're going to tie in Grogu and Mando at the end of all this?
I think Mac
think
nailed it
Grogu is
earlier.
gonna
He
be
was
support?
Well, Mac was just talking about how he thought this was going to lead in to the film, where this is truly about Ahsoka. We'll get introduced to Thrawn, I think, towards the very end, and this is going to catapult us into that. And the film is really going to be about that. The film is the heir to the Empire, and I would be surprised if that's not the name of the movie.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Well, that's all I got, fellas. And
all right, buddy.
Thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for all the support. Chut to you. And thanks for all of that. Got lots and lots of super chats here. Let's see. Here's Drew. Drew says this episode was great. Love seeing Rex. Yeah, in the Siege of Mandalore. Yeah, Rex was great. Voiced by Tem. Jim, I wonder if that's what Tem was talking about when he said, well, I gotta go and find out what's going on with my character. I have to go to California. If you remember right, he was talking about that, and maybe he was just doing a little quick ADR work there for Captain Rex in that little bit.
God, That didn't even occur to me that was the voice of Tim.
That was definitely the voice
I
of
was
Tim.
so in the moment. I'm just like, oh yeah, Captain Rex. Of course, Captain Rex is there. Why wouldn't he be there? You know, there was no even just like, I was just put so much into this idea of a live action episode of the Clone Wars that by the time we got to Captain Rex, there was no impact. Of course, you're supposed to be here, Captain Rex. This is only natural. This is only natural. But
Right.
wow, yeah, you know, Captain Rex is in this episode. This is the live action debut of Captain frickin' Rex.
Yeah, Tanya says the same thing. She goes, seeing Rex in the 501st with Ahsoka painted buckets was a dream come true. Long live the 501st. Long live RFR. Tanya, you're awesome. You're here every week. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for the support, hanging out in the chat. I'm
sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse the language, but good shit. That was some good shit. Oh,
Mac is still coming to terms with what he saw.
This is true, Padawan. Wowie, wow.
Diebot says the blending of the lightsabers and the waves was brilliant. Dave outdid himself with this episode. That was
and
cool.
Skywalker sound.
Yes, right.
Thank you. Sound guys never get respect. It's all Dave Filoni this, Dave Filoni that. What about the sound guys?
They knew what they right. They made that happen. Media Rav says this episode should have been the basis for the entire sequel trilogy. The Clone Wars sequences were utterly epic. I think there's an argument to be made there that in retrospect, what they're doing in the Filoni verse with Mando and Boba and now Ahsoka would have made for a trilogy. Yeah. I get it, but I'm kind of enjoying this ride, to be honest.
Right.
I like, call me old fashioned or lazy or what, but I like just sitting on my back porch with a drink and a smoke and watching the latest episode. I've been enjoying the hell out of this.
Absolutely impossible for this stuff to even be considered for a sequel trilogy in the way that everything went down. George Lucas had initiated production of the sequel trilogy before he sold the company to Disney. And during that time, he got commitments from the actors, those original trilogy actors who were so revered and loved. Disney couldn't just take the biggest problem Disney had was inheriting the ideas that George Lucas had already set in play pre-production for the sequel trilogy. That's a big problem that Disney had. But the biggest problem that Disney had was rejecting George Lucas in the process. That was a big problem and highly stupid. Yeah. What a dumb thing for them to do. And no, we won't forget. We will not forget.
Never forget.
So all the lumps they take are highly earned. And now in retrospect, we have so much more clarity about the substance of the sequel trilogy. It's almost impossible to defend that hot mess of a mess when we're seeing streaming episodes of this quality. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Come on, it's over. It's over. It's over for the sequel trilogy. It really is. You cannot defend it anymore in the wake of the storytelling that has been going down in streaming series, Mandalorian season 1 and 2. As great as this episode is, and I consider it to be among the greatest of Star Wars streaming episodes, but it does still, to me, and I know it's early to be making this call, but I'm going to call it as I see it. The season finale of Mandalorian season 2 was more impactful and had it just was a greater altogether moment for Star Wars.
Yeah.
I don't mean to diminish this, but Mando season 2 took its time over the course of 2 seasons for us to develop love for the characters. And then they drop in the most beloved character of all Star Wars characters. I think it's Luke Skywalker. I think I feel comfortable making that call that Luke Skywalker is the most beloved character, at least for fans like me who've been in it for the entire haul. And for him to appear at that highly emotional moment at the end of Mandalorian season 2, when everything was coming together, everything that was set up in the first 2 seasons of that amazing run that show had, to drop Luke in there. I mean, how many grown men were weeping like children at that point? And
Yeah.
and while this episode did elicit emotion from me, single tear, I think at one point, with the interaction between Anakin and Ahsoka, because I love the prequel trilogy and I love the Clone Wars and I love Ahsoka. I mean, it really hit me in all the feels, but I still have to put that Mandalorian season 2 finale up on the pedestal.
It's the high point.
Really do.
It's the one to beat if you're going to make a contest out of it. Yeah, there's just it.
I'm not too
still
fond on the
maintains-
ranking.
Right,
I don't
right.
rank the films all
But
the time.
still-
I don't do that, but still, I mean, that's just, first blush reactions. Like the best of the best when it comes to Disney Star Wars, and this is in no particular order, but this episode of Ahsoka, Part 5, the season finale of Mandalorian, Rogue One, the No Way Out episode of Andor.
Just going to say that. Yep.
The Siege of Mandalore story arc that wrapped up season 7 of the Clone Wars, and which really opened the door to a lot of the storytelling elements that we're exposed to in Ahsoka, the series. But I mean, just like those are 5 things that I just think really are masterpieces
High bar.
in the Disney era of Star Wars. Yes, the high bar, the high standards is all there. And yeah, so I that's the type of impact this episode has had on me. It's in my top 2.
There you go.
So that's pretty damn good. And it could, the more I spend time with it, maybe it could move up to number 1, because it does provide us with the closure we needed, I think, to the Anakin Ahsoka relationship that we didn't get in the Clone Wars. We just didn't get it. The great moments there are when Anakin and Ahsoka reunite. Ahsoka's a little cold to him, but Anakin does present her with these lightsabers, which then he sees she is discarded at the end of those episodes. He's in as Darth Vader. He finds them in the snow.
Right.
And that's her completely. And then what happens to Ahsoka after that? We don't know what happens to her character for 15 years on the timeline.
Yeah. There's one other moment in Ahsoka's life that I personally am hoping that we get to see, which is something that would explain to what extent, and if not, why she didn't, there was involvement with her and Luke and his Jedi Academy.
Right.
My prediction is that we're going to see the end of Ahsoka. I think we're going to see Ahsoka become one with the Force at some point, whether it's, I don't think it's going to be this series. It could be in the Filoni film or one of the films, but I think we're going to see her meet her end. I don't think Ahsoka is around during the events of the sequel trilogy.
Right.
I don't think that she was in a position to help Luke out with the Jedi Academy. I don't think she ever gets that opportunity. Something's going to happen.
Well, now keep in mind, she already knows Luke as
She does.
these events
Yes.
are happening.
Right. Right.
That sequence with her and Luke and Grogu in
Yep.
Book of Boba Fett, that's already happened.
No, I know that. I'm saying that as Luke, we haven't seen Luke really establish the Academy to the extent that we see in the flashback sequence of the betrayal of Ben Skywalker.
Right.
Or Ben Solo, sorry. So that's what I'm saying. By that point, I don't think Ahsoka is on the table. I don't think that she's a player on the board. And so we'll see what happens. I'm looking.
I just hope
looking forward to
the
that.
Purgle doesn't swallow her while he makes the jump to light speed.
Man, I tell you, that
Somewhere.
is a leap of faith. It is a leap of faith, and maybe we'll get Rebel Force Radio's Jedi Yogi John Marcoux to come and do an analysis of Ahsoka, because Hu Yang is like, are you sure about this? What are we going to do? We're going to just go into this thing's mouth. And there's a great line that she has towards the end that she says to Hu Yang, we'll just see where it goes. It could go anywhere. I know, but that's better than going nowhere. And that is what part of the lesson that she learned. She was going nowhere before. She was just spinning in the mud of her resentment, of her fear, of her guilt, her depression, all of that. And now she's ready to go forward in a meaningful way. It's very inspiring. It's extremely inspiring. I love when Star Wars inspires like that.
The rebirth.
Yeah.
She crosses the threshold. She doesn't necessarily defeat the power within the threshold, but she is able to master the power. Joseph Campbell has also said that the trash compactor sequence in the Death Star is an example of the step in the hero's journey that is symbolized by going into the belly of the whale. And and like I said, in the show, we actually do go into the belly of the whale, but I think that's actually after Ahsoka has already emerged via rebirth, and she defeated the power within the belly already, and that was her torturing herself over Anakin and the Jedi and everything that surrounds it, and the guilt she carried with her. But so I'm wondering, like, how does the trash compactor scene provide us with the hero not conquering the power within the threshold, but gets swallowed by the unknown, appears to have died? I mean, we see Luke do this when the Dianoga pulls him under. But when Luke emerges from that, is he a different character? I mean, he does become the guy who blows up the Death Star, and we know what that means.
Yeah.
So I guess, yes, that would be Luke going into the belly of the whale. Is when he gets pulled underwater by that Dianoga. It doesn't have that kind of impact on me that these Ahsoka examples have, but somebody says she goes into the mouth, not the belly. But yeah, I mean, that's
right.
It's the
Potato.
Jonah and the whale and Pinocchio and Moby Dick, the captain in Moby Dick, whatever his name was, I forget.
Back to the phones we go. Yeah, Ishmael. Call me Ishmael. We got longtime friend of the show, and you know her from the official Rebel Force Radio group, Mariana. Hey, Mariana.
Hey.
Good to hear from you.
Yes.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hey, guys.
Oh, Mariana must be so happy. She's so in love with Hayden Christensen, and he looked so dreamy in this episode.
Let her say that.
Oh, okay. All right. I don't want to steal your thunder. I thought he looked dreamy.
Yeah, I was going to say, good to see you guys. Long time.
Yeah.
I will say the last 24 hours have been an absolute wild ride. Like, watching that episode last night, I was like reliving like I was 12 years old again. It was just such an amazing experience.
Yeah, I hope that I know that Hayden was feeling the love at the last Star Wars Celebration with his return in Kenobi, but this is next level. I mean, yeah, it was cool to see Hayden as Vader. That was great, and I got to tell you, I didn't love the training sequences, to be honest with you, because I really wanted to see more of the. I wanted to see more of the off-screen bromance on screen between Hayden and Ewan, and you never quite get to see that. But this was a playful, fun, charismatic, humorous Anakin in this, and we all knew, at least I knew, that Hayden had it in him, but he just needed to be given kind of permission to go in that direction.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Actually, I wanted to mention to you guys, so in July, I saw Ashley, Matt, and James And they were all just excited for this show. They talked about the great encounters they had with Hayden. I spoke with Matt, and he mentioned how he bumped into him at London, and he said to Hayden, he's like, "Oh, it's so great to see Anakin get the love again." And Hayden said, "Well, it's because of you guys." So you could tell he clearly did his homework. That the new young actress Ariana Greenblatt did amazing, bringing little young Ahsoka to life. It was just an amazing experience. And you know, I'm just like you said, the Kenobi show was just a warm-up act. This was the big moment.
I think you're right. I think you're right. This was a more impactful Hayden as Anakin moment for me than it was in Kenobi. I love, now don't get me wrong, that battle and the split helmet and all of that. But let's not forget, we kind of saw that in Rebels. We saw that with Ahsoka, like almost the same damn thing with the helmet and his voice crackling. Now, doing it live action, big difference. But nonetheless, this was a combination of my Anakin Skywalker, the swashbuckling, heroic, charismatic guy that Matt Lanter kind of gave life to, but in the body of Hayden Christensen. So it really was the best of both worlds.
I know, it was just absolutely incredible, and I can't wait to see now where the rest of this show plays off now that Ahsoka has like emerged as Ahsoka the White. And a lot of people have been comparing this kind of like to Lord of the Rings with Gandalf. So it's been pretty interesting to see now where it goes. And we're finally going to see Thrawn. So I'm super pumped for that. And I hope, and I know what you guys have been talking about a lot of people are like, I don't know, because we all know where it ends. But you know what? This is Dave Filoni. He's literally George Lucas's Padawan. He understands Star Wars. In fact, why not just give him and Favreau the keys? I've been saying this for years.
I think they have the keys. I'll be honest with you. We'll talk about it on RFR this week, but Taika Waititi has all but said to people that his movie's not happening. They're joking about it at awards shows now. I just don't see any of this. I'll be honest. I may have another bet with our old buddy FJ DeSanto, but I think the next film that we see is the Filoni film. I don't think we're going to see a Star Wars movie before it. And I think this is the future of Star Wars, and I think they have the key. So, Mariana, thanks so much.
I hope so.
We really appreciate it. Thank you very much for the call. A few more super chats here we want to make sure that we get to. Here's Sal B. Crum says, Hera announcing weekly that I'm a general is the equivalent to Fennec's weekly fruit eating and her feet kicked up on a desk. Hashtag long live King Filoni. Yeah, I mean, she does throw that line around a lot. I'm a general. I can make bad decisions. Well, this general title's good for one thing. Yeah, she does throw that around a lot.
No, that title of hers, it's in serious jeopardy. As a matter of fact, I believe the decision has already been made to permanently strip her of her rank. Mon Mothma says it via the dialogue.
Yeah.
And I think Hera is going to come to that realization too and realize that she has nothing to lose in this upcoming potential battle against the returning Empire. Mon Mothma tells her flat out that the Senate Oversight Committee is going to determine if her command should be permanently suspended. You just don't say that unless it's already pretty much in motion here.
Has there ever been a line that just reeks of more bureaucratic BS?
Yes.
What was that committee name? The Senate Oversight Committee.
Committee.
Oh, God.
They're
Imagine being
gonna
on there.
fix all the oversights. Oh boy, that's what we need.
I yield my time to the gentlelady from Sullust. Can you?
Yeah, we're back in the Senate Rotunda again, getting nowhere fast with a bunch of ETs floating around. What are you guys even doing here? What the hell?
Hey, look, it's Turtle Wars. Turtle Wars says, what do y'all think? Does Ahsoka have a closet full of as many different headbands as Lando had capes? Oh, yeah, the headband. Does she? I think she has a subscription box where every month she pays $29.99 a month, and they send her a new one, and she can keep the ones that she likes, or she can send them back. That's
right. And she's so frustrated because every month they send her the same type. Don't they know I don't like these by now? So sending Jason Sedula off to the UPS store again. It's like, don't you ever keep anything they send you? All right, I'll go to the post office again.
Here's
midnight.
John Conger the second says Clone Wars forcebacks reminded me of the clones on Geonosis illuminated by blaster bolts. I think, Jim, that's what you were talking about, right? Was that the yeah?
That's the moment George Lucas pointed at that shot and said, "That is the Clone Wars." And Dave Filoni knows this, remembered it, and recreated Clone Wars battlefields with that in mind. I firmly believe that the George Lucas influence was at play, and the way he shot that Geonosis shot with those troopers banging forward against the droids, and all you see is a big cloud of dust and haze, blaster bolts. That is the Clone Wars, according to GL.
John said he had an 8-person pizza watch party and was astounded. That's awesome, man.
I had an 8-pizza 1-person watch party.
I'll tell you what, with that pizza you guys got in Chicago, I don't blame you. I'd be having one of those once a week, a 1-person 8-pizza party. That's for damn sure. Tanya comes back with more super chat. She says, I think Ahsoka completed her training in the world between worlds with Anakin and is now a Jedi. Thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, I think she was always a Jedi. Did Ahsoka become Jedi Knight?
No, she was always a Padawan. She was
always a Padawan.
As
Okay.
a matter of fact, she handed Anakin her Padawan braid when she walked away at the end of season 5.
Yeah. So she is now officially a Jedi Knight. I like that.
Yeah, I do too. I don't know if, Jedi Knight, or she's achieved a level of connection to the light side of the Force that has been out of reach for her up till this point.
Josh Carter says, I felt that this was adjacent to the Dagobah cave scene. You only need what you bring with you. She brought Anakin. They didn't meet up there, in my opinion. So Josh is on your side, Jim, that this was not meant to be seen as Anakin Force Ghost, but the mental impression perhaps that Ahsoka has to Anakin. She brought that in with her, so to speak, like the Dagobah cave.
Yes. I draw a lot of correlation between the cave on Dagobah. That is Luke Skywalker entering into the world between worlds. What do you think about that?
Whoa. That's heavy stuff, Doc. That is heavy stuff. I didn't even think about that. That's bold. That's cool.
He crosses the porthole. A portal. Porthole. A lot of people make that mistake. They say porthole, but it's portal. One word. Put that up your porthole.
I think we should bounce over back to the phones. We got some more Patreons in here waiting for us.
So much. Phones and super chats from this point till the end of the show.
All right, here's a Patreon member and first-time caller. This is Randy from North Dakota. Hey, Randy.
Hey, Chuck, guys.
Chuck, buddy.
So I've listened to you guys since the old days, since I was 16, and now I'm 33. So it's been a long time coming.
Oh, Lord. That's talking about heavy. That's heavy. All right. Well, it's great to have you on
and you're also my first podcast as well.
Oh, dude. Well, that means a lot. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to call and talk. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to mention how young Ahsoka actually is. I don't think we realize how young she was until we saw it in live action.
Totally with you. It did not register in animated form quite the way it did with an actual actress. Yes. Wow. Mm-hmm.
I always assumed Ahsoka was
age 14 at the beginning of
the Clone Wars and about age 17 or 18 at the end.
Say that first part again, Jim.
I think she was 14 at the start of the Clone Wars when she gets assigned to Anakin as Padawan, and by the end of the Clone Wars, she's around 17 or 18. So then you take 20 years between the end of the Clone Wars and the beginning of the original trilogy, which would mean she's 38 at the beginning of the original trilogy. Add 4 onto that, which is the length of time the original trilogy took. So that puts her at 42 by the time of Return of the Jedi. And these adventures, Mandalorian Season 1 takes place 5 years after the end of Return of the Jedi, I think. Or is it after the end of A New Hope? I can't remember.
But it's after Return of the Jedi. Yeah, it's about 5 years after
5 years
Jedi.
after the end of Return of the Jedi, which is consistent with Heir to the Empire and the Thrawn trilogy, which also took place 5 years after the end of the original trilogy as far as the expanded universe goes. So you add that on to 42. Now she's 47 at the beginning of The Mandalorian. Mandalorian takes place over the course of what, 3 years, 4 years maybe? So she's around 50 years old, quite honestly, at this point in time, I think. I think that's where my math leads me. Now you want to look at Rosario Dawson and how old she is. And Rosario is clocking in at, how old is old Rosario? Oh, I shouldn't say old Rosario. That doesn't sound right. But she's 44 years old.
Yeah, mid-40s, I thought, yeah.
So it's fair to think that she's playing an alien character who's 6 years her senior. I think that all falls within the age frame. So I'm looking at anywhere between 45 and early 50s for the character.
I love that Anakin says, you look old.
Yeah, well, I mean, the last time you saw her, she was just a teenager. So naturally, she would look a lot older. There's not a single teenager you can present to me that resembles
I think
a
it brings
teenager.
into question. I think it brings into question, why are the Jedi bringing such young Padawans onto the battlefield? I think at this point, it kind of shows why the Jedi have almost become egotistical and generals wanting to control the entire Clone Wars. So,
Randy, I think it was desperation. I don't think they really had a choice. Jedi were relatively few and far between. They were required, they were needed as generals. And remember, too, it was Yoda that decided to give Anakin a Padawan. He thought it would do him a lot of good. So by giving him a Padawan, Anakin's on the front lines. That puts the Padawan on the front line. Not defending the Jedi, obviously, but I think it was out of necessity because of how many fronts they were fighting on.
That's fair. It's just crazy, a 19-year-old Anakin and a 13-year-old Ahsoka.
It is crazy. I mean, but you think about, there are other countries where you turn 14, 15 years old. This still happens in 2023. You get trained. You get tossed into the military.
That's right.
But you're right that the live action version of Ahsoka at that age. I have a daughter that's 14, and I'm like, I can't even imagine. So it does bring an additional, I should say, weight to it when it's live action. Animation, animated characters are somewhat timeless and ageless. Just look at The Simpsons. But boy, when you put a real human being in the makeup, you definitely are committing to something there. So yeah.
And regardless of how young she actually is in the Clone Wars, she, because of the circumstances and experience, she certainly grows up really fast in that type of environment. So there's no time for her childhood, really, once she gets thrown into battle as Anakin's Padawan. It's all the Jedi. They're a very flawed organization. It's becoming more and more apparent. It was apparent in the prequel era.
Well,
it wasn't like the Jedi were ever presented to
Ahsoka
us
brings it up, though, that she is that opposed to being a warrior.
Yeah, she does. She says, essentially, she's like, wasn't what I signed up for.
Right. Keepers of peace, not soldiers.
Right. And Anakin tells her, we have to go with the times. This is what the times require of us.
Why is Anakin so progressive in that area? Why is he so go with the flow?
Because he excels at combat.
Yes.
Well, also maybe because he was much older when he started his training, and he already had so much real world experience that he can't separate conflict and violence from anything else, any other existence. There's no difference.
There is something to be said about what he endured as a slave. I mean, he's a survivor. He had to survive. He had to adapt. You know, it's obvious that even though Watto is a total ass to him, he's still, you know, yippee and turning some of the things that are going on in Watto's shop into a game. He still has he does the pod racing, and while you got a crook like Watto profiting off of it, it's a game to Anakin. He's finding a way to survive in these circumstances. And so Anakin's go with the flow attitude, it kind of makes sense given where he comes from and what he's had to put up with and endure. So Randy, thanks for the call, man. I really appreciate it. Good thoughts, child soldiers. Yeah.
To continue your thought, Anakin Skywalker has already been forged by an existence of hardship.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is pampered for him in his lifestyle growing up as a slave on Tatooine. Meanwhile, Ahsoka grew up with all the younglings in the luxurious Jedi palace there on Coruscant, having every one of her needs and desires taken care of for her. She didn't even have to think. All she had to do was open herself up to the Force. A young Anakin Skywalker during this very fragile time for a Force user where discipline is paramount. As they grow into the Force, Anakin wasn't allowed that opportunity. He was always scratching for survival, and that affects him as an adult Jedi. Oh, this is so wonderful to be having these conversations about prequel era Anakin Skywalker with a fresh addition to the mythology via this Ahsoka show and some new perspective. It'll be great then now after this series wraps up to go back and rewatch the prequel trilogy again with all the additions to the mythology via Ahsoka, and yes, the Kenobi series, which I think has a lot of worthwhile bones in that body.
Yes,
that beaten up body. There's a lot of worthwhile bones in there to put together a very compelling expansion of the story of Obi-Wan Kenobi while he's in exile. And I always recommend to people search out the Patterson cut, where somebody took all of the great parts of the Kenobi series and crafted it into a Star Wars film that I think is extremely effective in the way all of the scenes then get reorganized and presented in this new packaging. So check that out, Patterson Cut. You can see it for free online. I think he requires you to like join his website or anything, but he doesn't charge anything. And I think what he's doing is very legit. My phone hasn't been hacked or anything as a result of me joining his website, so don't worry about things like that. You'll get what you want, and Kai Patterson is the editor who's supplying it, and he brings out the best of the Kenobi series. I don't think he's really going to need to do that work on the Ahsoka series.
Oh, we're going to get one. We're going to get one. You know it's going to happen. Maybe not from him, but somebody.
Somebody probably will, but despite my complaints, I'm going to be very curious in a rewatch of this series once it's all said and done, and probably reevaluate certain things once the full story gets presented to us. But then again, you know, I'm not letting those first 4 episodes off the hook as far as my previous criticisms go. Those stand as moments in time that I might look back at and say, yeah, you should have been more patient, you moron. But that's not what this is all about. You know, I want to
real time commentary
in the moment. I want to be in the moment and experiencing this and journaling my emotional reactions and my educated reactions and all the reactions, even if I like break out in a rash. I want that to be documented.
That only happened that one time. Blake's take is up next. Hey, Blake, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Blake.
Man, them clankers.
Like the clankers.
Blake, I didn't know you did impersonations. You do any other Star Wars impersonations? Give me a Chewbacca real quick. Yeah, okay. We might have to take that one back to the shed and work on that a little bit. How about a C-3PO? You got a C-3PO?
Oh my great heavens. The odds of survival are 3,800 billion to 1.
Oh, there it
that's
is.
perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect.
I like that.
Bravo. And the final one I'm going to ask for is the classic. Let me hear what Darth Vader sounds like.
Don't choke on your aspiration.
Oh, wow. He throws a Rogue One line in.
Rogue One line.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, Blake, when I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
What do you got? What do you got for us this week, buddy? You want to lay down some new predictions, or are you just trying to soak it all in? Soak it all in. Get it?
This episode was crazy.
Yes.
I'm gonna say that. So whenever we were watching this, as soon as it aired, and then we see like to where it flashes between Anakin and Vader over and over, I was jumping, running in circles, screaming in excitement that Vader is in the episode.
Yes.
It
Even
was-
just those
Because Vader's like my favorite character ever.
Now they didn't. Blake, did it bother you that they didn't fully commit to Vader? Because at the end, towards the end of that face-off between the two of them, you heard the Vader breathing. He's coming towards her, and he's flashing into Vader. But it wasn't, Vader during the duel. Were you disappointed, or did you like that they kind of pulled back and didn't fully commit to the Vader?
I mean, I wish they fully committed to it. See, I was thinking like that they might have had like where Anakin was like just gonna fight her, and then the armor was slowly just gonna, like whenever he goes back and forth and it cuts the scene, he's gonna slowly turn into Vader, slowly but surely.
Yeah.
That's what I thought was gonna happen. But then it just flashes in between Vader and Anakin, Vader, Anakin. But the thing is, when they use Anakin in this episode, they don't really have a set time point. Since this is like the world between worlds, he's like a force ghost or something like that. He's some kind of force that we don't know.
We don't know.
It could just be a force trick that's going on, Ahsoka, but it's helping her. But in it, since he's in the world between worlds, it's like every time of Anakin, as we see at the beginning of it, it's like it's him whenever he's just full Jedi. No, like Attack of the Clones kind of era. He's happy with his life a bit. But then we go on and more into the different times it goes into different Clone Wars fights. The final fight, his eyes turn red, the saber's red, and it's flashing between Vader and him. Even in the first Clone Wars fight, it flashes to Vader real quick.
Right.
So I think that since it's the world between worlds, it's every time of Anakin that has happened.
Oh, so it's Anakin en total. It's everything that makes up Anakin. And that's funny because he actually talks about that. There's a moment where he says, everything that I am is within you. That's the nature of the Padawan master relationship, and we're part of a legacy, which you could say is, kind of
because all the knowledge passes down and
exactly
stuff that passes down from each master.
Exactly. Hey, Blake, with only 3 more episodes, we already got the big Hayden Christensen cameo. Where do you think we're headed over the next 3 episodes?
Okay. So I know everyone is wanting to see Ezra and Thrawn.
Yes.
Finally, we've been waiting this entire series for that.
Right.
I feel like in the next episode, they're gonna save, not in the next episode, but they're gonna save Thrawn till the 7th episode, he's like a surprise. So we're gonna see to where Ahsoka is in the Purgle, and then she's gonna make it into the other galaxy, and she's gonna find Ezra. And this entire time, Sabine has been looking for Ezra, but Ahsoka, really, she's just like, I don't care if we find Ezra or not. I care more about finding Thrawn than anything. But I feel like it's going to be the opposite way around. Sabine and Old Vin are going to find Thrawn, while Ahsoka and Huyang are going to
find Ezra. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I like it.
Interesting. I like that. I like
Yeah.
that.
I like
Well,
that a
dude,
lot.
much appreciated. We always love to hear from you. Everybody that listens to the show loves to hear from you. So thanks so much. Now it's time to go to bed, okay?
Okay.
All right, buddy.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much.
Go
We'll
to
talk to you
bed.
next week.
Go to
Appreciate it,
bed
Blake.
before the Sandman in the shape of FJ DeSanto visits you, and that's the last thing anybody wants. FJ's a big fan of Blake, so I just want to.
Yes.
He
Eric
talks
from
about
Phoenix
Blake a lot.
says, when Ahsoka's ship went into the whale's mouth, my daughter said, he either wants us to go to the back of his throat or he wants a root beer float. Great quote and great episode. Dave nailed it. All right. Out of the mouths of babes for sure.
What does that mean?
Or a root beer float. That
How
was
do you
Eric from
decipher
Phoenix.
How do you decipher that?
Well, it's kid talk. I mean, it clearly made a lot of
No,
sense.
no,
to
no.
her
There,
at the
there has
time.
to be a point to. I mean, there has to be a reference.
Or a root beer a root
At Disneyland, they
beer.
have there's a big whale there.
Or is it a Disney
There's a big
thing?
whale.
It's a-
They sell root beer floats inside that whale. I don't think I've ever actually
Eric,
walked into the.
we might need some more context.
Yeah, I want
here.
an explanation for this.
All right,
Jason's
Dan-
writing it off as just some nonsensical child speak, but I think there's some meaning behind this, and I want to know what it is.
Mac
you
wants to
imagine
go
if
deeper.
Could you imagine Jason being your dad? Everything you say to him, it's like, "Oh, that's great, kid." It's like, no, but the garage, Dad, the garage is really on fire. Oh, that's the mind.
that's
of a
crazy.
child.
Oh,
the
out of
mind
the
a
mouths of
child.
babes.
Dad, the house is burning down. Oh, what a wonderful imagination.
Oh my God. It's like you live in this house.
I know you.
Here's Jedi Jace. He says Anakin was trying to teach Ahsoka to let go and keep fighting. That's why the first 4 episodes she wasn't herself. He was trying to remind her what he taught her. She is a warrior of peace. Yeah, I'm about 50-50 on that, Jace. I see what you're saying. Obviously, thanks for the super chat.
She definitely was not herself in the first 4 episodes.
No.
Notice this? We were wringing our hands over this, for crying out. I was losing sleep over it, for crying out loud. But now that we've been, provided with a path, a direction for the show, finally, episode 5, a little late to be jumping it, but I mean, hey, that's just the way they want to unfurl this story at us. So we have to take it the way it's coming at us, discussing the Star Wars that is, as opposed to whining about the Star Wars that isn't. And, like Ahsoka, I have emerged as Jimmy Mac the White. And you'll see. Future
I see a
episodes.
military green that you garb. You should have been decked out in all. Mac, I never see you wearing white. Never.
Well, see, this is me emerging from the belly of the whale. This after
okay.
show itself
All right.
is me. I'm emerging from the world between worlds. Ooh. And so yes, next time you see me, I will be Jimmy Mac the White.
I want to see him in white jeans.
I'm gonna look like I'm gonna look like Ricardo Montalban at the beginning of Fantasy Island. I'm gonna look like Steve Martin doing a stand-up comedy tour in 1977. I'm gonna be dressed so white. It's not even gonna be funny.
Jeff Holland says, I got a fever. And the only prescription, a live-action Clone Wars series show / movie with Hayden, Ewan, Tem, Young, Ahsoka, Ariana G, RFR #1. Thanks, buddy.
Ariana Grande. Oh no, he means Ariana Greenblatt.
Greenblatt, the other Ariana
We gotta
G.
keep it all together here.
Jeff is awesome. I got a fever. I got the same fever, Jeff. Appreciate it. Diana says she was great, but I think Ashley's voice would have stirred more emotions in the fan base. Not complaining, it was an amazing episode. Diana, I got to tell you, Diana, I have a problem because I think that I think you'd be surprised at how much it can pull you out of something when you see someone overdubbed. It really, you go back and look at some of the old movies where they did that a lot, especially when actresses or actors had to sing in those old timey musicals and stuff. It's just weird. It's just like, I don't dig it. So I'm kind of glad that they kept the organic performance of the actress in there. But thanks for the super chat, just the same.
Yeah, I think that would have broken through the fourth wall a little too much. And
Yeah.
It would have been hard to adjust to something like that. I really, as much as I just love Ashley Eckstein and believe in her ownership of Ahsoka and how she embodies the character and everything, she's our animated Ahsoka. And it took me 5 episodes of this series to finally come to terms with that myself. So, but I have, and I'm moving forward now with Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka, totally won over by what I think was a revelation as far as her acting chops goes. This episode alone. I always knew Rosario was a good actor, but can she be Ahsoka? Can she make me care about Ahsoka? Big questions I was asking myself after 4 episodes. After 5 episodes, I'm reborn. Jack the White. Yeah.
Mad About Digital Art says, wow, very generous super chat here. Says, RFR rocks. If already answered, sorry for asking again. Is Ahsoka the sister now? Makes sense, but if she is, who is the dark? Is Anakin the father and the balance? Lots of possibilities. Dude, I love it. I love the spirit. I love the deep cuts that you're bringing. You got to understand that that's a deep cut. Mortis is a deep cut when it comes to Star Wars. I don't think it figures in here, but if it helps you in your head canon, go for it. Go for it. But
yeah,
I don't think
it
it's
can
there.
apply to that very easily. But those characters, father, son, daughter, they're not real. They're symbols.
They are symbols.
They're not real people. They're symbols of the light side and the dark side. And the balance itself, which is supposed to be the father. Doesn't mean the father is in the middle, but he is the one who is able to provide the balance between the dark side son and the light side sister. It's all allegory. It's not like, oh, we've been waiting around for our replacements for a long time. This shift is never ending.
Yes,
how come
it's not
Anakin
like
and Ahsoka haven't shown up yet. No, it doesn't work that way. And Ahsoka never died.
It's
She
not
never
like you're
died
the
on
Grail
Mortis. That
Knight
never happened.
waiting for the next Grail Knight to show up to take over the shift, right? From Indiana Jones
From Indiana
and the Last
Jones.
Crusade. I don't think it works that way. Although I heard a wild theory today. I heard that Anakin replaced the brother, Ahsoka replaced the daughter, and the father is, are you ready for this? Balin Skull. Balin Skull for 500, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I heard.
Now that's another character we have no information about. I want a backstory on Balin's skull for me to. I mean, I think he's cool and everything. I love the introduction of the character, but I want to care about the character, and all I'm getting is surface level stuff. We need a deeper dive into who Balin is, what he's after. Where did he come from? How did he survive Order 66? Why did he lose his faith in the Jedi? These are things I want to know.
Remember what he said. Remember what he said to Sabine in the last episode. You get your friend back. I get to serve a greater good. What is that greater good? What is
that?
after?
What's his end game? What's his end game?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Good stuff.
What's motivating him?
Sky Forceland says, this is the most fulfilled I've felt after an episode of Disney Star Wars. The argument about consequences was amazing, and Hayden finally has a good script. Star Wars perfection. P.S. I'm a patron. How do I call in? Well, it's probably too late for that, but next week we can have you call in. The number is 708-866-1737. It's not just open up for Patreon supporters, but if you identify yourself to Tyler, our call screener, as being one, you get to the head of the line. In fact, we haven't even we've had so many calls tonight and so many super chats. We're not going to get to them all, obviously, but we do prioritize the patrons. So thanks very much, Sky. Appreciate it. Thanks for the super chat. You're awesome. What else we got here? Fart Party. This guy. Baby Belushi, we love him. Remember the Force Awakens concept art where they had Force Ghost Anakin fading in and out visually as Vader? Disney was too scared back then to pull that trigger on the back on that back then and tried to steer clear of the prequels. If they only knew. You know what, Baby Belushi, you're so right. the avoidance of the prequels. Jimmy Mack coined the term prequelitis. Disney had prequelitis back in 2012. They wanted to avoid it like the plague. They canceled the Clone Wars, guys. Make no mistake about it. Disney canceled the Clone Wars. And it was only because of the incredible groundswell of support, largely fostered here at Rebel Force Radio for the Clone Wars, did they decide to bring it back. I remember when people were accusing Jimmy Mack of being a Henny Penny Sky is Falling character. That
Chicken Little.
Chicken Little, they said, the sky is falling. Jimmy Mack says they're going to cancel Clone Wars. Jimmy Mack was right. They did cancel Clone Wars, and it was Rebel Force Radio's, not saying it was just us, but we certainly were leading the charge, the tip of the spear for bringing the Clone Wars back all those years later.
Yeah, we led the charge, but you guys did all the fighting in the trenches.
Oh, remember we were sending voicemails and emails to Bob Iger. We sent didn't we send him a whole CD of voicemails?
The CD to Lucasfilm.
Oh, to Lucasfilm, yeah.
Yeah, presumably it did reach the top executive suite, which I'm proud of for that.
Absolutely. We should be. Here's John Rossi. John says, you can interpret the World Between Worlds scenes in a lot of ways, but it continued the Star Wars tropes of letting go. It was a beautiful episode, brought back the magic of Star Wars and that spiritual journey. John, you're 100% right. Regardless of how you interpret it, Mac and I have two different interpretations of this, but where we can agree is that it was a spiritual journey. It was about the magic, the myth, spirituality of Star Wars, and that's, I think, really when it hits its sweet spot. So we can argue about the specifics, but we're united in how much this, I think, lives up to the legacy of Star Wars. What else we got? Howdy, it's David, says, you guys last week didn't want her to unload her grief/weight, but that's what World Between Worlds did for her. Called it. She referred to herself as a Jedi when talking to Jason about her ship. First self-reference. That's true. I don't know that we
didn't want her to unload. Who said we didn't want her to unload her grief/weight? I think I was asking for just the opposite of that. I wanted a little bit more exposition, a little bit more knowledge about why the character was acting the way she was acting. How do you interpret that as us not wanting her to unload it? I was begging for it, actually.
Yeah,
she was close-lipped. I didn't hear any sort of display of anything from Ahsoka. That's why I was so confused about the character. I think I was demanding it. Oh,
yeah, maybe a misinterpretation.
We'll hear a different show than the one we're actually doing sometimes, but I appreciate the super chat.
Rich Brendel says Mortis equals World Between Worlds. Baba Booey, Baba Booey.
No, I think that's fair to say. I mean,
is it the same?
I think they're spiritual journeys that these characters go on, and the different sort of realms they tap into, it's the Force, providing them with access. But, these places aren't a place you physically visit. These are for us as an audience, we're getting visual representation of what it's like for the characters as they tap into the Force, because that can't really be, an explanation can only take you so far.
Right.
Yoda did a great job of it, and so did Obi-Wan Kenobi. But that magic, it's not in a bottle. Every once in a while, you have to devise new ways to tell the story. And I'm always open and patient enough for that, even though at times I seem closed off and impatient. It's just going through it in the moment.
Yeah,
for sure.
The Old Brother podcast says, chut from a Patreon, Faith finally rewarded. That Clone Wars sequence was phenomenal, and young Ahsoka was so good. Let's hope the remaining three bring the goods. Great to hear. Tem, too. May the Force be with you. Thank you very much, Oh Brother. Check out the Oh Brother podcast wherever you find podcasts. Thanks for the support and all of that. Wow, man, I tell you, we still have a few more. I'll tell you what, Jim, while you're doing your final thoughts,
okay,
I'm going to try to screen capture the super chats that we still have on the table. We have a few, and we will address them on the weekly show this
That's
week.
good. I like that.
So why don't we
I
do
like
that?
that
So
idea.
while you're doing that, I'll screen capture those. We'll have a way to address them. So why don't we just get right to it and, play the music and, yeah. But we do want to make sure that we check in with Tyler. Tyler's been holding the fort down
Hard
with
at work,
the
man.
call screening. Thanks, Tyler. Some great calls you teed up for us. We didn't get to all of them, obviously, but we knew this was going to be a popular episode and people have a lot to say about it. Was there anything that we left off the table this week?
It was just so good to be back in theaters watching this again. I can't express that enough. And one of the themes of the callers that didn't get on was just how there's two consciousnesses or whatever talking to each other. The conscious of Anakin, the conscious of Ahsoka, and there's thoughts that you're hearing the adult Ahsoka voice in the child version of Ahsoka.
Yes.
And that is just kind of trippy when you go back and rewatch.
That's right.
So, just tons of good stuff. I feel like I have to watch this 1,000 times, and I did grab my poster.
There's the
Yay!
poster right there. Oh, that's a beauty, dude. What's that going for? Seriously, like online these days?
No idea.
Okay,
but
they're coveted.
I guess listen, I like it. I think it's cool, but
Kevin Lyle will be charging $200 for that at the next convention at the Norse Legion booth.
Well, Kevin, get in touch. Make something happen.
I love it. All right, man. Thank you as always. Appreciate it.
See you guys.
We'll see you next week, buddy. All right, Jimmy Mac, final thoughts on this episode. As you said, ranked in your top 5 of Star Wars Disney Plus streaming show moments.
Yes. The top
What
2,
else you got
actually.
to say?
Top 2. Well, I got a few final thoughts about Part 5, Shadow Warrior. Cool title, by the way. Shadow Warrior. And, just a few visual observations I made. Planet Cetos. We begin back on Planet Cetos. It's in the same system as Planet Cheetos, Planet Mentos, and Planet Churros. I bet you didn't know that, but that'll be in the next encyclopedia, I'm sure. I noticed Jason Sindula wears his pants higher than my grandfather wore his back in 1981. I did. Hera wears super high waists as well. You could really tell from those nice shots from the rear. Okay, all right. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is a great talent who delivers her lines with conviction and confidence. She's married to Obi-Wan himself, Ewan McGregor. She's a great actor, so we need to show her some respect because that great actor has one fine caboose, let me just say. Moving forward, let's get our heads out of the gutter. Swank. I loved as Jason watched the Ghost and the X-Wing swoop in after rescuing Ahsoka visually. That was an awesome hero moment for the Ghost. The Ghost deserves hero moments as well. And when it's shot really well, I think about the great shots that the Millennium Falcon received over the years and how that established the Falcon as a character in itself and gave it great hero moments. Well, I felt like the Ghost had one in this show. It's definitely a fact that Baylan Skoll defeated Ahsoka. So, on the list of things to do, a showdown with Baylan Skoll and a resolution to that conflict is necessary. For much like Luke had to face off Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi, even though his mentors were telling him not to. It was very important that Luke do just that. And I think it's also very important that we get our questions answered about the character of Ahsoka. How did she get away from Malachor? Why was she sidelined during the original trilogy? Why did she decide to train Sabine? Why did she leave Sabine? How does she know Luke? How did she get reunited with Huang? These are just a few of the questions I have about the character. But after this episode and the way that so much was established firmly about Ahsoka, the live-action version, via flashbacks to young Ahsoka. It was always older Ahsoka in those scenes, regardless of whether or not we were seeing a young version of her. It was always the Rosario Dawson version of Ahsoka, inhabiting those visions. So I thought it was kind of interesting to see young Ahsoka through old Ahsoka's eyes. Very interesting. What would you do if all of a sudden you woke up one day and found yourself in your body as a 14-year-old? Oh my God, I could think of a couple things I'd do, and I wouldn't even have to leave my bedroom to do them. All right, I thought all in all, this was a high point for the series. I thought it was a high point for Star Wars streaming. It's a serious win for Star Wars, which desperately needed a win, and we as a fan base needed a win. It was the highest quality of Star Wars for the super fan. Casuals might get lost in the wake a little bit, but I'm not here to worry about them. I know who I'm talking to. I'm talking to you, and you love Star Wars and you follow this stuff, and you are steeped in the mythology. The characters earned their victories and their outcomes in this episode. It restored all my confidence for the series and for Rosario Dawson. I mean, don't blame me for having my guard up. This hasn't been a great year for Star Wars. Mandalorian season 2 was lackluster, or season 3 was lackluster, and this is the same studio that brought us the Willow series. So let's just stop, I mean, of course I have my guard up. I care about this stuff with passion, and I want it to be good. And I thought Rosario's performance was a revelation, as was the young Ahsoka actress, Ariana Greenblatt. At 15, I feel she's already a powerful actor. And, this has just been a great week for Star Wars. That's really all I have to say. The only thing that would have made it just a little bit better, just a wee bit better, would have been if we got one of these in the show. And you know who I'm talking about. Puff a pig, not in this episode.
All well said. Thanks, everybody, so much for all the great super chats, the great conversation going on in the chat, all of the phone calls. We just can't get to them all. Thank you all so much for your support and being here each and every week with us. We've got 3 more. We've got episodes 6, 7, 8, parts 6, 7, and 8. Wednesday nights, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, 7 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Pacific. So much more to talk about. Don't forget about the Rebel Force Radio weekly podcast that'll be coming at you this Saturday morning. We'll have answers to some of the super chats we didn't get to, as well as just regular Star Wars chatter, Star Wars potpourri, as we call it. I'm sure Ahsoka will be at the top in the front of everyone's minds. So check that out. That drops Saturday morning. But until then, we will see you next time. Big thanks to Tyler for being here, as always. We'll catch you on the next one. Love you all so much. For Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
the Force will be with you, always.